Have you ever wondered if your relationship could survive an affair? I can't trust you because this happened is, can I trust this whole relationship? Was it all a lie? I let them know that it's okay not to know, meaning you're not packing your bags and call the lawyer. The clarity will come with time. But now there's an opportunity to heal and therefore something new that we can learn to hopefully trust. I've even heard couples say,
Infinite Intimacy is a podcast for informational purposes only, not a substitute for therapy or professional mental health care.
have you ever wondered if your relationship could survive an affair? Today, we're sitting with 3 real stories that live inside that same question. And we're doing it from the perspective of couples therapists. Let's talk about how to navigate betrayal after the affair and what couples actually need to know before deciding to stay or leave. I'm Sofia, Robirosa, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and joining me today is Vanessa Sierra, my co-host and fellow therapist. Let's get into it. Welcome, Vanessa. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So for our first-time listeners, can you please tell them a little bit about you?
Yes. My name is Vanessa Sierra. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also trained in trauma-focused modalities, including EMDR. And I have been working in the field for over 20 years and specializing in particular nowadays working with couples.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So we both share this passion about working with couples, right? We always talk about how wonderful it is to see the journey of a couple healing, right? I know for me, what brought me to this field, it felt like the field chose me, right? From a young age, I started noticing my interest in relationships because unfortunately my parents' relationship ended. So I started getting curious about relationships and how they work and what helps them be in a good place, in a content place. Mm-hmm. So we have 3 real stories of couples that have sent us regarding betrayals and affairs. So let's get into the first one. I keep waking up and forgetting, and then I remember. My husband had an affair 2 years ago. It lasted 8 months. When I find out, my entire understanding of our marriage, 15 years of it, collapsed in a single afternoon. We are still together, but the trust has been broken. We have kids, a home, and I am financially dependent on him. I feel trapped. What can I do? So that sentence of our whole relationship collapsed in a single afternoon, right? Like that's so common to hear, right? Like people that experience a betrayal, right? It's not just about, I can't trust you because this happened, is can I trust this whole relationship, right? Like, I've even heard couples say, you know, was it all a lie kind of feeling, right? Like it creates a sense of hopelessness of who are we, right? So it's a common place to start. So in a way, what we're helping couples do in this process, right, is redefine their relationship.
Right.
Right. The way that I like to think of it is we're helping couples create their relationship 2.0 version.
Right.
Right. Like first version got us here. Well, maybe the ending chapter of this story wasn't a good one. We're hurting. Mm-hmm. We're not in a good place. But now there's an opportunity to heal and create a whole new possible dynamic between us. And therefore, something new that we can learn to hopefully trust.
As it says in the Gottman method, it's the second marriage. So once the couple comes in and they give their story, it's true. It's, you know, you want to frame it as you had the first part of your marriage, right? And now something really, you know, heartbreaking, devastating has happened. And now it's a relearning of a new marriage. And so, you know, the second marriage that they're going to be in.
Yeah. So it just doesn't shatter the trust, but the sense of reality for the person, potentially for both, right? So that's the journey in a way to start understanding that in order to heal, yes, it doesn't make sense to think like we're going to learn to trust the same thing, because that would be hard to believe that the whole thing that was happening is not going to lead to a different outcome, right? So I think that that's a way to feel a lot of hope, to start thinking about it like what you're going to do is reinvent your relationship And when you see something different, right? And when you feel something different, then the trust starts settling in, because now I can trust this because it's new. It's not the same that it used to be.
Right.
Yeah. But talking about that sense of reality being shattered, right? The journey, I think, is so important to start helping everybody really gain their voice, right? As to how things are being experienced, really learning how to talk about the impact and their understanding of how the relationship got there, both, and also in the individual, right? Like there's an individual story and then there's a relational story, and both need to be understood. Mm-hmm. What do I mean about individual, right? I think it's always understanding, was there depression? Was there a major life transition happening? Was there a marital problem that has been unresolved for so many years? A combination of these things. There could be so many different things that have maybe caused for the relationship to land there.
Yeah.
So what are some of your ideas on how to start helping a couple navigating a situation like this?
In particular to this first story?
Yes.
Well, she's indicating that there's a trauma response there that is lingering.
Yes.
And so her understanding of that is through her own experience, but it could be also that the husband has no clue, right? And so he might be viewing behaviors in her and not understanding the why. And so at the beginning, it's really helpful to point out to the couple, let's look at, what is the typical trauma response to infidelity, mm-hmm. right? And so, once you start reading behaviors, usually the person who, experienced the betrayal can say, oh my gosh, that's me. Yes, that's right. And da-da-da. And so in that, you start creating your first sort of step towards awareness, but also an understanding for the husband, right? Yeah. Like, why does she keep saying, I've had couples where the husband's like, I don't understand. We were doing great and she went to do laundry and all of a sudden she comes out and she's crying.
Yeah. You can't help it, right? Like right. The trauma response, right? It's very similar to what people experience with PTSD, with post-traumatic stress right. disorder, right? Like you can't help your thoughts. They're invasive, they're intrusive, they're catastrophic. You have a roller coaster of emotions, right? And a lot of couples talk about the 2:00 a.m. wake up and like, hours of talking about it at that time and not getting sleep. And then, the cycle of being exhausted, both emotionally and physically, right? That's a very common place that couples start, right? In her case, the thing is that she's been in this for 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll first normalize that I'm sure you have too, right? But I've seen couples that they have a lingering situation right. for decades sometimes, 10, 15 years, whatever, in a very long marriage. And maybe they didn't seek help back then. And right. or maybe they did, but maybe they wanted to move on, but there were still lingering things that didn't help them really redefine their relationship and fully heal. Mm-hmm. And so, for the person that did the betrayal, is kind of like, when is this going to be over? Right, right. Why can't we just move on? I've shown to you, I'm not going to do this again. And, let's just move on. In her case, I'm not really sure if she's showing that overtly to the husband. I hear a sense of dealing with it a lot alone.
Right. But it could also be if she is dealing with it alone, it could also be him not maybe understanding when she isolates, excuse me, or when she gets very quiet, or where it sort of seems like she's off in her own world, and he thought they were connecting, all of a sudden she's kind of not there, right? So, and I think too that it's been 2 years, right? So that's a real strong indicator. It really never was looked at in a way where she could start feeling safe enough to connect with him. So we don't know the backstory, but let's say maybe a lot of times the couples will come in and they say, well, we saw someone for like a month. And I think, wow, that's it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, for whatever reason, they discontinued. It could be that they just weren't ready, and that's okay.
Also because, that sometimes it's so painful to look at what's painful, right?
Yeah.
And the feeling of like just wanting to put it away and move on, right? But when it lingers, right, it lingers,
Sure.
and then it just comes out in some way. It just has to.
And also, it was an affair, right? And so, if it was something that really wasn't guided, and with professional help, right, really guided to help them with these different stages, then your imagination starts to take over, right? Why her? I mean, he must have loved her. It was 8 months, and why? So now, the wife is sitting with this value comparison. Why was she so valuable to him that this lingered for 8 months? Were those questions ever asked? Did they ever get to that point, right? So at the beginning, I think it's important to understand the context of what was disclosed, right? Once she found out, were those questions answered? What was the conversation like? Was it just at some point ignored and they just kind of went on with their life? So there's a reason why 2 years later, again, the severity, it's not too clear, right? But there's a reason. It could be a normal, right? 2 years go by and it's okay. Maybe sometimes that memory comes up. But in this case, it seems like it's affecting her functioning.
Yeah, she talks about feeling trapped.
Right.
Talks about not knowing, in a way, like whether she's making the choice to want to stay because she has to, because she's financially dependent.
Right.
Or because she really wants to. So one of the first things in whatever stage a couple comes to see me for a situation like this is I let them know that it's okay not to know, like what you want to know. Like what we have is today. And if for today you're choosing to stay, meaning you're not packing your bags and call the lawyer for divorce, right? But for today, you're here. Let's start from there, right? Like the clarity will come with time, right? Like with time, as that newer relationship dynamic starts coming around and the work is done and we're feeling closer, you might have that idea of like, I want to stay, or, or the contrary, you're like, nothing changes, whatever, maybe you get clarity the other way, right? But it's okay not to know what, your lens of trust was broken. So of course, that fear of, am I going to get hurt is there, of course. So it makes sense that you won't be 100%, committed to, yes, I want to stay right off the bat.
Yeah. And, her feeling trapped, obviously, right, is her sense of there's a dysregulation that consistently kind of, is in the underbelly of things, right?
Yeah.
So, because imagine this, if there was enough of an intervention and treatment through time, right? Let's say because it's been 2 years, and she regains enough of a sense of self, of autonomy, and things like that, maybe the financial question wouldn't be so much of like, I feel trapped. It could be, this is our dynamic. This is, what we decided as a couple, whatever it is, right? But so, one of those things of trauma is that we hold it physically too, right? So how it's affecting my sleep and X, Y, and Z and all of those things, my appetite and, my motivation. So I think tying that to the financial feeling trapped, because theoretically, as a human being, you're not trapped, right? You have your own thoughts, you have your own emotions, So that's a real big indicator that she is stuck in her own space, right? And so starting with that, I think, is really helpful. But also seeing, right, if, and we tell couples all the time, if they can look at their trauma together and, the partner can say, this is what happens to me. And then the listener,
in this case,
spouse,
the hurt,
right? Yeah, can say, oh, and and start to make sense of things.
Validated.
Just in that disclosure, vulnerability of the trauma that they're experiencing, and that you start creating little ties of trust. Because if your spouse can sit there and listen, and that's tough for the tough who did had the affair. It's difficult for them as a human being to hear that hurt. I mean,
because they feel responsible because they caused it, right? So it's much harder to hear your spouse's pain when you know that you're the one that caused it.
Right. And so it's kind of giving them a sort of a space for grace, which is, it's okay that he also has a vulnerability of like, man, through this act of mine, this is still affecting her, right? And so that's important too for both partners to understand that there's compassion for both of them in a different sense, right? Because they're still experiencing it in their own way. And so I think that's an important lens to kind of put out there.
Though, as well, in addition to looking at the trauma and the trauma response, right? Like, yes, it might be a way that it navigates this through making sense of being financially dependent to him and be okay with it in the long run. But many times what I do see with working with couples is that there is a new definition of what self-agency is, like, or another word, independence in some way, or a new redefinition of the person in some way, right? And we see that across the board with trauma, right? Like, and that is an important part of healing from trauma is what's the new narrative for you? Like, what was the overarching theme that you learned that helps you know more about yourself? Like, what did you discover that you needed more of yourself? So in this case, I mean, the range might be from, does she have access to see the finances, right? To start from there. Like, do you want to see that? Would that help you feel more like you know what's going on? Does it mean like you want to have your own bank account? Does it mean that you want to start making your own money? Like, how have you been feeling as a stay-at-home mom to start with even, right? Like, because maybe there was already like not great feelings about that from before. So now it's like, I wasn't feeling good about being a stay-at-home mom already. I wanted to already start seeing myself as a professional in some way or working person. And then on top of that, now this happens and I feel that pain of being financially dependent even more, right? Like now it's like double whammy, right? So I'll be curious to find out like how was that feeling of financial dependency even from before to see if there needs to be a rebirth of understanding that for herself.
Right.
Those are some places I would start. Do you have any final thoughts on that one?
It's always significant, right? It's part of the context of in those years that they were married, how did it default into he was the main financial provider, right? It could be like, hey, we want to raise a family. And as family values, which is really important to share, we want this, we want mom to stay home, da, da, da. And it could be that, like what you're saying, throughout time, she started finding, well, they're getting older and they're mostly in school. And so what am I doing with my time? And da, da, da. So when someone says I feel trapped, and that's what I was alluding to before, is like, a lot of times you really are saying my mind feels trapped emotionally, even spiritually, right? Like how am I like navigating through this? Like, is this something that I already, like you were saying, was already, sort of trying to make sense of, and this just kind of, put that nail in the coffin type of deal. Yeah. Right. But I think it's important for maybe the couple, but her in particular, to kind of look at finances. A lot of times that's an external vocalization of saying, if only I had that financial freedom, I wouldn't be stuck in the situation that but maybe you wouldn't choose that. Maybe she really does love her husband, right? And maybe she really just, wanted to give it a try. Mom. Right. So all those narratives are really important because it's individual to each and every case. Yep. And so, that building of self-esteem and confidence, again, it might curtail feeling the trappedness because of finances. Yeah. And it may not, right? And she may want to use that as a motivation to, well, I always wanted to, I don't know, take a class in X, Y, and Z, or I always wanted to, and yeah. I want to pause here because I know this episode can be hard for some. If you're experiencing infidelity, whether you are the one who was hurt or the one who caused the harm, please know that this is the most important time to have real clinical support. Our team at Infinite Therapeutic Services specializes in helping you and your family navigate this moment in time. And we've created a free resource you can download today and start your path that supports your family best. This is what we're here for. Let's continue. So, you were talking about that comparison of value, right? Like comparing yourself, that person that would felt the betrayal, right? Like, why her?
versus me, what did she have that I didn't have,
Right.
that kind of thing, right? And that's a very common place to go, right? Like, even if rationally you understand that it wasn't about that, maybe, maybe you find out how that person looks and you realize, no, I look better, right? Like, how did this happen, right? Or other like maybe
Sure.
rationally you might even have that realization, but of course the pain
Sure.
goes to that comparison.
And sometimes that's worse.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes I've actually had couples where the husband will say, I look at this guy and this guy is this and blah, 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 and I'm this and I'm this. I just don't understand.
Because the thing, and this is why I wanted to say that, is most affairs and most betrayals, just generally speaking, are not about wanting to leave your spouse, are not about not loving your spouse. There's a million other reasons that go in play, but those are not typically the ones that we see. The majority of them are not about wanting to have a plan B, right? And so I just wanted to say that because I think it's important to hear that sense of validation, right? That it's a lot about other important things that need to be looked at for sure, right? But not necessarily that there's not value in the relationship and the spouse.
Right.
Yeah. So let's get into the second story. I got the other woman pregnant. I know what the Bible says about grace. I am not sure it was written for this. I have been a Christian my entire life, and then I made a decision that broke all of it. The woman I was seeing is pregnant, 12 weeks. My wife found out about the affair 3 weeks before we found out about the pregnancy. Abortion is not an option. That faith does not allow me to end life regardless of how it was created. She shared that that was as me choosing the other woman. That is not what I meant, but I understand why it landed that way. The Bible talks about men like Abraham, David, Solomon, men in scripture who had multiple women, multiple households, and children from all of them. I know how that sounds. I know it was not the same. But I am a man who is desperate to find a framework that helps me with my faith, my marriage, and take responsibility for this child all at the same time. My wife calls it justification. I am not trying to escape accountability. I am trying to find a version of this where I am still a man I recognize. So far, I have not found it. Tough situation. Very tough situation.
Yeah.
When there is a child from an affair or a betrayal, it's a living memory of the situation, right? It's something that is always going to be there in some capacity, and so it definitely adds a complexity to how to heal and how to move forward.
Yeah.
I would say that in a situation like this, what I'm hearing, that the dilemma between the husband and the wife is that the wife feels like he's validating himself first, right? Like, I don't feel good with my decision, and I'm reaching into my faith to try to appease how I feel about my mistake before she feels that she's getting validated for the pain that he caused to her. Right? So kind of like rushing into, what do we do about the baby? And this is what I want to do about the baby, right? And religion is explaining that this is what I need to do, which that definitely is going to need to be part of the conversation. But I think the wife really needs to hear a lot more about how he understands this as impacting her and the pain that this has caused.
I'm curious, is this an affair, or is this sort of like a one night stand? It doesn't
say. No. It just says it was the other woman. So potentially more than just a one night stand.
So that's a tricky one, because he is talking about his faith. He is talking, he's identifying, he's a practicing Christian for all his life and da-da-da. And so I don't know what her faith is, but it's tough because when betrayal happens, at that moment in the couple is literally just about the betrayal, right? There's another person, you stepped out of the marriage, and on top of that, now there's a life that's going to happen. And by the way, is going to keep growing, right? And the mom is not going to go anywhere. And so what is that going to look like? And so this couple now is grappling with, there's no period, right? into the affair, right? It's just like a run-on sentence.
Yes.
Right, because now there's a life. So I think that's an important thing to look at. So just to be respectful of someone who is Christian. So I myself am Christian, and actually, what it says in the Bible is that so the two characters that he mentioned, which is you said Solomon and David, okay,
and Abraham.
They were actually kings.
Yes.
And actually, if you read scripture that has to do with them, actually what it says is you are not to have multiple wives. And so when they stepped out of because they were men of faith, right? So when they stepped out of that, then the story goes on to say what happened in their lives, how going outside of what God said, which is you don't have multiple wives, actually you have that one wife. Right? And so when they stepped out of it, it starts to see how their life, just like everyday real life, how their life turns around for the worse. Right? So if someone is Christian and they come in with that, a situation that way, the also interesting thing about it, so the same if somebody practiced Islam or somebody practiced Hinduism, which I don't practice, I would be super curious. I'd be like, can you tell me about that?
Yeah.
Where does it say that in the scripture? Where does it, like
what is your understanding of all of it? Yeah.
And then so if you have a religion, it becomes part of your culture, meaning the culture of your home. Do you pray before a meal? Do you whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, being respectful that that's his faith, I would say, do you mind? Do you want to? Can you show me in scripture where it says that? Because he's bringing that into his decision making.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I'll be curious about the wives.
Exactly, right? And then, so the great thing about it, though, as they start to heal, is that the wife and the husband together can see there is a plethora of
Stories,
books and scriptures that talk about how a man and a woman should love, and it's like the most beautiful poetry, right? It even talks about like how to honor her body, how she honors his, how the beauty in like one another, and da da da. And it always goes back to that, it's a monogamous, one wife, one husband, right? So imagine presenting that to this client, and he's like, right? Like, I thought it was that multiple. No, it actually tells you the opposite. It actually tells you how to honor that monogamous relationship in scripture of Christianity, right? Okay, so if it was another religion that I wouldn't have knowledge of, I would
learn about it.
Right. But I would also ask permission. I would also say, do you want this to be part of, actually when we do intakes, there's a part that says spirituality.
Yeah.
And there's a part that says intake is, the initial session when they come in and we learned a couple. The intake form, there's a question that says, is part of your faith something you want to include in your interventions?
Yes.
Right. So you got to be respectful because, it's their goals, right? They come in with a particular goal and we're there to help professionally facilitate and do interventions and things like that. Right. And so all of that we can also pull in the wife because it doesn't say too much about
what's her
personal faith.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know, maybe she was Christian, maybe she wasn't, maybe, I don't know. But for her, it's more significant that she hears it as he's using it as an excuse,
yeah.
right? And so again, it's what did they understand together? Was this something? Did they have a spiritual connection? And spirituality doesn't have to mean religion. Spirituality could be like, oh, look at the birds, how beautiful.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's
and you
life,
have that moment,
life
right?
mottos, life a guidance of how you see life,
right? Yeah. And so the moral question of the baby, imagine that's.
I think, going back to what I said first, I think like it's gonna be really hard to jump straight into like what are we doing with the baby, and this is what my faith says before they stabilize their dynamic, their situation. How is she feeling? What was the impact for her? Like. How do we get here? All of that, feel like the husband can relate to her pain. I hear his pain in this story, right? And I think that's what needs to really like occur a lot more between the two of them. Of what's her pain? How does she get to feel better or feel like he can understand her? and what was the impact of all of it for her.
Sure.
And because when, talking again about the idea of trauma responses and all of that, when she starts feeling safer, right, with him and doing that work together, I feel a little more regulated and all of that. I think it might be more of an opening to start understanding, like, how do we involve his faith or potentially their faith if they share it
Right.
into what we want to do next, right? So I think that is going to be really important for this couple, that he shows transparency, empathy, consistency, and that emotional responsibility towards her.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because right now it sounds he's using, just a sort of a rational approach. Like, well, but, and this and that, and that, which is sort of a problem solving. I got to problem solve this now. And right. Okay.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. It's a situation pretty much nobody wants to find themselves in, right? So he's probably defaulting to what was already a strength for him, rational, who knows, right? But all those things are really great tools to use to be curious, along with the couple, right? And helping them sort of navigate through really, tough situations.
Tough situation, yeah. Well, and finally for our third story, we actually got this one from a teenager. He says, I was not supposed to see it. I saw it anyway. I found the message on a Saturday morning. My dad left his phone on the counter and he kept lighting up and I just looked. I am 16 and I know what I was reading. I did not say anything for 4 days. I just walked around the house watching my parents have normal conversations and eat dinner together and ask me about school. I told my mom on a Wednesday. I showed her the phone. She went very still in a way I had never seen her before and asked me to go to my room. They are talking about divorce. I feel guilty. I used to think my parents had a good marriage. I used to think that meant something, like it was proof that love could actually work. Should I have handled it this different? Oh, my heart goes to him. What tough situation for him to be, in situations like this, I think, people feel like, who am I loyal to, right? Yeah. Like, am I loyal to my dad or am I loyal to my mom? And, or, whatever the dilemma is of knowing a secret. Secrets weigh heavily emotionally.
Yeah.
And the first thing I would say is you're not responsible for your parents' mistakes, right? Like, dad made a mistake. And it's up in the marriage. Your parents are always going to be your parents, even if their relationship doesn't work. And to try to make sense of that guilt as, yes, of course, it's hard to be in that place where you love two people, both your parents, and you felt like in a way you betrayed your own dad by telling your mom, right? But you are not responsible for your dad's behavior. It's now for them to figure out how to go about that. So, and if I would talk to the parents, I would encourage them to validate a lot of that to their child, right? Like, tell your child it's not your fault. We're sorry you're in this situation that belongs to our marriage, and you're always going to be our child, no matter what. We're always going to love you. You're always going to be our son, and we'll have to work this out between us.
Yeah. Do we know how the parents reacted to him?
No. He only sent his situation to us. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's in the therapy language, as a parentified, right, role that the kids took on, which is the role that an adult would make a decision like that.
Yeah.
Do I tell my spouse? Do I not? Right.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe he thought, I'm doing the noble thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right, by letting mom know, right, what occurred.
Because telling the truth is not the same as causing the problem. The problem is the affair, not him telling the truth.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And we don't know if he felt protective over mom. We don't know if he felt like dad should have known better, and because to me it sort of sounds like there's a moral code that maybe the teenager was following. Especially when he said, well, I always thought my parents had a healthy marriage, meaning you're kind of getting an indicator there wasn't specific dysfunction going on in the home where, if it was the opposite, he would say, well, there was arguing, so I kind of, I saw that one coming, right, type of deal, right?
Yeah.
But you and I have talked about this before, where a lot of times the teenagers will already have seen symptoms, something off in the home, right? And so who knows? Maybe it was validating something. Maybe it's the same with any client. You want to understand some of the background.
Yeah.
Right? Is he the oldest child?
That too.
Right? Yeah. Is he like the one that was to take care of the younger kids? And, so he already has this expectation of self of being the responsible one and, looking out for things.
Yeah.
And
I think this is an example of how affairs and betrayals do hurt the entire family, right? Like in this case, he saw the whole thing, meaning he saw exactly what was going on. There's some couples that address this like in their bedroom and the kids don't really find out what's going on, like what's the issue, but they can feel that something is wrong. And kids, their sense of regulation, the younger they are, the more they deregulate when their parents are deregulated, right? Like once children get older, he's a teenager, they can start having more their own way of regulating, right? Like they have developed some of that already, but they're still sensitive to the parents' regulation, of course, as we are in any setting, right, of relationships. So again, if I would have access to the whole family, I would also mention that, there's an impact for everybody. I would hope he also gets an outlet to talk about it with somebody, right? Outside of the parents, ideally, a counselor as well, therapist as well. But helping the family have some of those boundaries, right? Like we don't want the 16-year-old to be listening to your problems, right? Don't come vent about, mom or about dad or that kind of thing, right? That can be really, really painful for the child. So we had some really heartfelt stories today, and we hope that we help to understand a little bit more how to navigate these situations. What would you say are your top ideas that would you like couples to take away from this today?
Well, infidelity can feel very alone, and it can feel, there's when you talk about, for both people, right, the person who had the affair and the person who, felt the betrayal, right? There's a betrayal there's a sense of betrayal of self for both people, right? Because now the betrayer, right, has to hear the pain, but they also have to deal with their own guilt, remorse, or whatever it is, right? And then, we talked a lot about the traumatic stress, symptoms that the other spouse may have, the partner may have. So it's actually very normal to feel alone. It's normal to feel like the walls are closing in on you. It's normal to hate the sound of silence, right? Because that's a strong dread. It's that the ruminations that both people can have. What's going to happen? You're at work, you can't think. So all of those things are really normal, and I think that it's important for couples to understand, if they are experiencing that is you're not doing anything wrong. You're not crazy. You're not, you should, I should be stronger. Yeah. Everybody's going to think that because you want to feel stronger. But if you are in that space, it's actually quite normal. It just says you're a human being.
Yeah.
Right? Who's trying to really, wrap their mind around something that you really wish wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. And remembering that what you're working towards is a new redefined version of the relationship, where in that process it's super important to learn how to be emotionally present for each other. It's very important for the person that betrayed to really be okay taking accountability and validating, right? There's a lot of need of self-care through this because it's a difficult thing to do, right? So a lot of that is important. And the process of stabilizing, right, like we were saying before, right, it is in those spaces of a lot of dialogue, accountability, validation, being present, remembering why you want to do this too. Like, why do you want to give it a try, right? And we were saying that it's not about you need to know exactly where you want to be, but if you're going to be here today, what is that voice? What is that message of why you wanted to try for today?
Yeah.
Right.
I do want to add this, just because if you're a couple who, most couples, remain living in the home together, right? So you also want to look at what is a safe space in my own home environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because, with infidelity, if you're still sleeping, sometimes they don't. Sometimes, they go, one sleeps in the guest room, or one ends up going, oh, I'm sleeping in the room with my daughter, right? Okay. So you want to also look at your home environment because you are literally there every day. So, are there spaces where give you a kind of more of a little bit of a warm feeling? Okay, what is it about that space? Yeah. So maybe it's color, right? Maybe part of, we don't think about those things like, hearing something, maybe one of them really loves the coffee in the morning. I know I do. Right? And going outside and just breathing before having to deal with these thoughts and these feelings, right? So you want to identify those things because your home space, you can't escape it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about those soothing things for your senses, right? Like things, smells that bring you comfort, textures that bring you comfort, that comfy blanket or, that space, the colors. Those are all speaking up for in regards to how to regulate, right? Well, thank you so much for coming today, Vanessa, and have this awesome conversation. I really enjoy our talks.
Thank you. It was great being here.
If you know someone who would benefit from this conversation, please share it. And if you're in the middle of a similar situation, please do not navigate it alone. Reach for help. I am Sofia Robirosa with Vanessa Sierra, our co-host, and this is Infinite Intimacy. See you on the next one.